They sent an SOS to the galaxy. Armada heard it. First, Elena Vasquez wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the communication array for the third time that morning. The mining colony of New Hadley's Hope sat on the edge of known space, a small dot of human life surrounded by endless darkness. Most days, the isolation felt peaceful. Today, something felt wrong. The mining crews had been reporting strange readings all week. Equipment going missing, strange sounds in the lower tunnels. Johnson from Mining Team 7 swore he saw something moving in the shadows, something that didn't belong to any known species in the galactic database. "Elena, you getting anything on the deep space scanners?" called out Marcus Chen from the security station. His voice carried a tension that made Elena's stomach tighten. She adjusted the controls and frowned at her screen. "Nothing official, but there's some kind of interference coming from the asteroid field. Could be solar flares, but the pattern is weird." Outside the command center's windows, New Hadley's Hope looked normal enough. The mining platforms hummed with activity. Transport ships moved back and forth between the surface and the orbital processing station. Children played in the dome's recreation area while their parents worked the night shift. Everything looked normal, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The first attack came at 0347. Local time. Elena was running final system checks when every alarm in the command center started screaming. Red lights flashed across her console as proximity sensors detected multiple contacts moving fast toward the colony. "What the hell?" Marcus jumped from his chair, his hands flying over the defense controls. "Elena, I'm showing bogies coming from the asteroid field. Big ones. Moving too fast for normal ships." Elena's fingers danced across her keyboard trying to get a clear reading. What she saw made her blood freeze. The contacts weren't ships in any traditional sense. They looked organic, like massive creatures swimming through space. But that was impossible. Nothing could survive in the vacuum without protection. "Get me Colony Director Hayes," she shouted over the alarms. "Now!" The communication screen flickered to life, showing Director Hayes in his nightclothes, his gray hair messy from sleep. "What's the emergency, Elena?" "We have incoming hostiles. Unknown type. They'll be here in 15 minutes. Hayes went pale. "How many?" Elena checked her screen again. The numbers kept climbing. At least 30 contacts. Maybe more. They're moving in formation, but not like any military pattern I've seen. Alert all stations. Get the miners inside the domes. Activate defense grid. The next 15 minutes felt like hours. Elena watched the contacts grow larger on her screen, while emergency teams herded colonists into the reinforced shelters. The colony's defense turrets came online, their targeting systems struggling to lock onto the strange incoming objects. When the creatures finally came into visual range, Elena understood why the sensors had trouble identifying them. They weren't ships or normal life forms. They were nightmares. Each creature was the size of a small building, with a body that seemed part machine and part flesh. Metal bones showed through translucent skin that pulsed with strange energy. Tentacles writhed from their sides, each one tipped with cutting tools that looked both grown and manufactured. They moved through space like they were swimming, their movements too smooth for something so large. "My God," whispered Marcus. "What are those things?" Elena had no answer. Nothing in the galactic database looked like these creatures. They seemed to combine the worst aspects of technology and biology into something that shouldn't exist. The first creature hit the outer mining platform with a sound that shook the entire colony. Elena watched in horror as it began to tear into the metal structure, its tentacles cutting through reinforced steel like paper. But it wasn't just destroying the platform. It was eating it. Where the creature's body touched the metal, the structure dissolved and flowed into the creature's form. Elena could see it growing larger, its body absorbing both the materials and the energy systems of the platform. "It's consuming the technology," she breathed. "The whole platform is being absorbed." More creatures landed on other structures around the colony. Each one began the same horrifying process, eating their way through humanity's carefully built outpost. The defense turrets fired continuously, but their energy beams seemed to make the creatures stronger rather than weaker. Director Hayes' voice crackled over the communication system. "All personnel to emergency shelters." "This is not a drill." "Repeat. All personnel to emergency shelters." Elena looked at Marcus. Both of them knew their duty was to stay at their posts and coordinate the defense. But watching the creatures work, they both understood something terrible. The colony was lost. "Elena," Marcus said quietly, "we need to warn Earth, warn everyone." She nodded, her hands already moving to the long-range communication array. If these things could absorb technology and grow stronger, they wouldn't stop with one colony. They would spread across human space like a plague. The communication system sparked to life, boosting its signal as high as possible. Elena knew she might only get one chance to get the message out before the creatures reached the command center. "This is New Hadley's Hope Colony," she spoke into the microphone, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. These are not normal raiders or pirates. The attackers appear to be biomechanical creatures that consume both organic matter and technology." An explosion shook the building. Through the window, Elena could see one of the creatures had reached the main power plant. Sparks flew as it began absorbing the fusion reactor, its body glowing brighter as it fed on the energy. "They're eating our technology and growing stronger," Elena continued her transmission. "I repeat, they consume both biological matter and manufactured materials. They appear to be spreading toward other colonies in the system." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered and several of Elena's screens went dark. She could hear screaming from somewhere in the colony, the sound of people who had encountered the creatures up close. "If anyone receives this message, warn Earth Command, warn the Galactic Council. These things are not just attacking our colony. They're harvesting it. They're preparing for something bigger." The building shook again. Through her remaining sensors, Elena could see the creatures had surrounded the command center, their tentacles pressed against the walls, testing the structure's strength. Marcus grabbed her shoulder. "Elena, we have to go now." She looked at her console one more time. The long-range array was still working, still broadcasting her message across the galaxy. She had done everything she could to warn the rest of humanity. "This is Communications Officer Elena Vasquez, New Hadley's Hope Colony," she said into the microphone one final time. "If anyone receives this, remember what I'm telling you. They eat everything. They grow stronger with every world they consume. Don't try to negotiate with them. Don't try to understand them, just run. Run as far and as fast as you can." The wall exploded inward. A creature's tentacle, thick as Elena's waist and covered in metal spines, reached into the command center. She grabbed Marcus's hand and ran for the emergency exit as the creature began absorbing her equipment, her computers, her life's work. Behind them, the transmission continued to broadcast across the galaxy, carrying Elena's warning to anyone who would listen. Most species would dismiss it as panic from a primitive colony. But somewhere in space, other humans would hear her words and understand the true horror heading their way. The last thing Elena saw as they reached the emergency tunnel was the creature absorbing the communication array, its body glowing as it fed on humanity's technology. Then darkness swallowed them, and New Hadley's hope fell silent forever. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of the HCDF flagship Indomitable, staring at the message replay for the dozenth time. Elena Vasquez's desperate voice filled the bridge, describing creatures that sounded like something from a nightmare. "Ma'am," said Commander Torres at the communication station, "we've lost contact with 3 more colonies in the Perseus Arm. Last transmission from New Singapore was 18 hours ago." Chen felt her jaw tighten. New Hadley's hope had gone dark completely. No signals, no emergency beacons, nothing. In her 25 years of military service, she had never seen an entire colony simply vanish from all sensors. "What's Earth Command's response?" she asked. Torres looked uncomfortable. "They're waiting for Galactic Council approval before sending any relief forces. The Council is still debating whether this constitutes a genuine emergency or just colonial panic." Chen's hands curled into fists. She had spent too many years dealing with the Galactic Council's bureaucracy. While they debated and argued about proper procedures, human colonies were dying. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Park from the tactical station, "I'm picking up another transmission. It's from the mining platform Perseverance." Chen nodded grimly. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was broken, filled with static and terror. "This is Captain Rodriguez, mining platform Perseverance. They're here." The things from the warnings. "They're eating the station. Eating the crew. Oh God, they're growing." The transmission cut to static. Chen looked around her bridge crew. These were good people, trained professionals who had served with her through 3 major conflicts. She saw her own determination reflected in their faces. "Lieutenant Park, What's our current position? We're 3 weeks from the Perseus arm at maximum burn, Admiral. The Third Fleet is spread across 2 sectors, but we could recall them within 48 hours. Chen nodded slowly. The Third Fleet represented humanity's most advanced naval force. 847 ships of various classes, crewed by the best officers humanity could produce. It was also their strongest defense against external threats. Taking the fleet away from Earth space without authorization was a court-martial offense. But leaving human colonies to face this threat alone was something she couldn't live with. Send recall orders to all Third Fleet vessels, she said firmly. Priority Alpha. All ships to rendezvous at waypoint Tango 7. Admiral, Commander Torres said carefully. Earth Command specifically ordered us to wait for Council approval. I heard Earth Command's orders, Chen replied. But I also heard Elena Vasquez's last transmission. Those creatures are spreading, consuming everything in their path. By the time the Council finishes debating, there might not be any colonies left to save. She turned to face her crew directly. I'm taking full responsibility for this decision. Anyone who wants to transfer to another command before we move can do so. No questions asked, no marks on your record. Nobody moved. Not one member of her crew stepped forward. Commander Torres spoke for all of them. Where the fleet goes, we go, Admiral. The colonies are counting on us. Over the next 48 hours, Chen watched her fleet assemble. Ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace at the rendezvous point. Heavy cruisers with armor thick enough to shrug off asteroid impacts. Destroyers built for speed and firepower. Carriers loaded with fighter squadrons. Even the massive dreadnought Righteous Fury, humanity's largest warship. Each captain reported ready for immediate deployment, despite having no idea what they would face in the Perseus arm. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species reacted to humanity's warnings with typical bureaucratic caution. The Altrurian Collective sent a formal note expressing concern and promising to consider the matter at their next scheduled assembly in 6 months. The Zephyrian Trade Alliance suggested that humans had probably provoked the attack through aggressive expansion into sensitive territories. Only the Galactic Council's official response force moved toward the threatened area, but even they traveled slowly, stopping at every starbase for resupply and diplomatic consultation. They're treating this like a routine patrol, observed Commander Torres as they monitored Council communications. Maximum safe speed, standard formation, full diplomatic protocols. Chen shook her head in disgust. She had dealt with other species' military forces before. They fought wars like chess games with careful moves and proper etiquette. The idea of an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or negotiated with simply didn't fit their understanding of conflict. How long until we reach the Perseus arm? She asked. 18 days at current speed, replied Navigation Officer Kim. We're pushing the engines harder than recommended, but they'll hold. Chen nodded. Every day they saved might mean another colony survived. She had studied Elena's transmission carefully, analyzing every word. The creatures she described weren't just raiders or conquerors. They were something far worse, a force that consumed civilizations and grew stronger with each victory. As the Third Fleet burned through hyperspace toward the threatened colonies, more reports reached them. Colony after colony went silent. Each transmission that got through was more desperate than the last. The creatures were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient at their horrible harvest. Admiral, Torres said during their final approach to the Hadley's Hope system, long-range sensors are picking up something massive in orbit around the colony world. Chen moved to the sensor station and studied the readings. What she saw made her blood run cold. In orbit around the dead colony world sat a structure the size of a small moon. But it wasn't built from metal or stone. The sensors showed organic compounds mixed with absorbed technology, all pulsing with energy signatures that hurt to look at. It's a biostation, she whispered. They've built something from the materials they consumed. As they watched, smaller creatures moved in and out of the massive structure like insects serving a hive. Energy pulses radiated outward from the biostation, clearly communication signals coordinating with other creatures across multiple star systems. My God, said Commander Torres. They're not just consuming randomly. They're building something, organizing. Chen felt the weight of realization settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just an attack on human colonies. The creatures were preparing for something much larger. They were using humanity's outposts as raw material to build an invasion force that could threaten the entire galaxy. She thought about the Galactic Council's slow response, their careful diplomatic approach. They had no idea what was coming. They were preparing to negotiate with an enemy that viewed all organic life as food and all technology as building material. All ships, battle stations, Chen ordered. We're going to show these things what happens when they threaten human worlds. As alarms sounded throughout the fleet, Chen looked out at the biostation growing larger on their screens. Elena Vasquez had warned the galaxy about this threat. Now it was time to make sure her sacrifice meant something. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in attack formation, ready to face an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Behind them, the Galactic Council's response force continued their leisurely approach, still debating proper engagement protocols. But Admiral Chen Wei wasn't interested in protocols. She was interested in making sure these creatures never got the chance to consume another human world. The Battle of Hadley's Hope began with a sound that none of the human crews had expected. Silence. As the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace, every sensor on every ship detected the massive biostation orbiting the dead colony world. But the creatures made no immediate move to attack. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching as her tactical officers analyzed the enemy. The biostation pulsed with absorbed energy, easily the size of Earth's moon but grown rather than built. Smaller creature ships moved around it like cells in a bloodstream. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Park, "I'm counting at least 200 individual hostiles. They're not moving to intercept us." Chen frowned. Every military instinct told her this was wrong. No force would simply wait while an enemy fleet positioned itself for attack. Unless they're studying us, she realized. Just like they studied the colonies before consuming them. Commander Torres looked up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from the biostation. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was wrong in every possible way. It sounded like Elena Vasquez, but spoken through something that had consumed her voice along with everything else. The words came from 1,000 throats at once. Human speech filtered through alien biology. "We are the Devourers," the voice said in Elena's stolen tones. "We have grown. We have learned. Your technology will feed us. Your biology will strengthen us. Your resistance is inefficient." Chen felt rage building in her chest. These creatures hadn't just killed Elena and the other colonists. They had absorbed them, stolen their voices, turned their deaths into a mockery. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the Human Colonial Defense Force," she replied. "You have attacked our colonies and murdered our people. We're here to stop you." The stolen voice laughed with Elena's mouth but something else's mind. "You cannot stop consumption. You cannot stop growth. Your fleet will feed the great work." The communication cut off, and immediately every creature around the biostation began moving toward the human fleet. Chen had fought in 3 major wars against various hostile species. She knew how civilized warfare worked, carefully planned maneuvers targeting specific systems to disable rather than destroy, offering chances for surrender. The Galactic Council had strict rules about proportional response and minimizing casualties, but as she watched creatures that had consumed human children swimming through space toward her ships, Chen decided the Galactic Council could keep their rules. "All ships," she broadcasted to the fleet. "These things ate our people. They're using our friends' voices to mock us. We don't negotiate with parasites and we don't show mercy to monsters. Weapons free. Show them what humans do to things that threaten our children." The response from her fleet was immediate and terrible. Every weapon humanity had developed over centuries of warfare opened fire at once. Plasma cannons designed to crack asteroid belts, missile swarms that could level cities, energy weapons that could cut through reinforced battle armor. The creatures seemed surprised by the intensity of the human response. Their bioships, designed to absorb energy and grow stronger, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by more firepower than they could process. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, commanding the destroyer Vengeful Spirit, found herself facing 3 creature ships that had broken through the main battle line. Her weapons were doing damage, but not enough to stop them before they reached her ship. "Ma'am," called her weapons officer, "they're adapting to our fire. They're absorbing the energy faster than we can deliver it." Rodriguez looked at her tactical display, then at her crew. These were people she had served with for 5 years. People who trusted her to bring them home alive. But she could see the creatures closing in, their tentacles already reaching for her ship's hull. "All hands abandon ship," she ordered, Emergency evacuation procedures. Captain, her first officer protested, the escape pods won't get clear in time. Rodriguez was already strapping herself into the pilot's chair. They will if I give them enough time. She waited until the last escape pod cleared the ship, then locked her controls and pointed the vengeful spirit directly at the largest creature. At full military power, her destroyer accelerated toward the bioship like a guided missile. This is for New Hadley's Hope, she said quietly, and overloaded her reactor core. The explosion was visible from every ship in both fleets. Rodriguez's sacrifice took out not just her target, but 2 other creature ships caught in the chain reaction. But more importantly, it showed the other human crew something crucial. The creatures could be destroyed if you hit them hard enough and fast enough. Across the battle space, other human captains began making similar decisions. Commander Yuki Tanaka led her entire fighter squadron in a suicide run against the biostation's defensive grid, clearing the way for torpedo bombers to reach the structure's core. Lieutenant Commander Brooks rammed his crippled cruiser into a cluster of creature ships, rather than let them absorb his ship's technology. The carnage was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humans fought with a fury that shocked even veteran military observers monitoring the battle from safe distances. They accepted casualty rates that would have caused any other species to retreat immediately. But they were also learning. Chief Engineer Lou Martinez, working in the depths of the Indomitable's engineering section, noticed something strange in the wreckage of destroyed creatures. Admiral, he reported over the communication system, I've been analyzing the debris from the destroyed hostiles. There's something weird about their composition. What kind of weird? Chen asked, even as she coordinated the battle around her. They can absorb most of our technology and biological matter, but there are certain elements they can't process. Rare earth metals like lithium and cesium seem to poison their systems. Chen felt a spark of hope. How much of those elements do we have in our supply stores? Not much in pure form, but our mining ships carry separation equipment. We could refine what we need from raw asteroid material. Within an hour, human ships across the battle zone were jury-rigging their weapons to fire payloads of refined rare earth metals. The effect on the creatures was immediate and devastating. Instead of absorbing the metals and growing stronger, they began to dissolve, their biomechanical bodies unable to process the toxic elements. The tide of battle turned. Creatures that had seemed unstoppable began falling to human innovation and determination. The massive biostation, overwhelmed by coordinated attacks with the new weapons, started to collapse in on itself. Just as victory seemed certain, the Galactic Council's response fleet finally arrived at the edge of the system. The sleek, pristine ships of various member species dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered down according to diplomatic protocols. Admiral Zenthari of the Altrurian Collective immediately opened communication channels. Human vessels, this is the Galactic Council Response Force. We are here to negotiate a peaceful resolution to this conflict. Chen stared at her communication screen in disbelief. Around her, human ships were still fighting for their lives against biomechanical horrors that had consumed entire colonies. Admiral Zenthari, these creatures cannot be negotiated with. They consume all organic life and technology. They've already destroyed multiple human colonies. Nevertheless, proper diplomatic protocols must be followed. All Council member species have a right to representation in any conflict resolution. Chen looked around her bridge. Her crew was exhausted, bloodied, but victorious. The biostation was breaking apart and the surviving creatures were fleeing toward deep space. Admiral Zenthari, she said quietly, you can follow your protocols if you want, but my people are going after every single one of these things until they're all dead. They ate our children. They used our friends' voices to mock us. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. As the Galactic Council fleet took up positions to begin their diplomatic procedures, Admiral Chen gave orders that would echo across the galaxy. All ships, prepare for pursuit. We're going to hunt down every last one of these creatures no matter how long it takes or how far we have to chase them. The Battle of Hadley's Hope was over, but the war was just beginning, and for the first time in galactic history, one species had declared its intention to wage total war against an enemy that threatened all organic life. 3 years after the Battle of Hadley's Hope, the galaxy had learned to recognize the sound of human warships dropping out of hyperspace. It was a different sound than other species' vessels made. harder, more aggressive, like predators announcing their presence. Admiral Chen stood in the war room aboard the Indomitable, studying star charts marked with red crosses. Each cross represented a system where the Devourers had been tracked, cornered, and eliminated. 17 systems across 3 galactic arms, and they were closing in on the last known nest. "Ma'am," reported Captain Kim, now her chief tactical officer after 2 promotions earned in combat. "Long-range scouts confirm the target is in the Maelstrom Nebula." "It's big, Admiral. Bigger than anything we've seen before." Chen nodded grimly. The pattern had become clear over years of pursuit. Each time they destroyed a Devourer nest, the remaining creatures consolidated into fewer, larger groups. They were learning, adapting, becoming more dangerous even as their numbers decreased. "What's our fleet strength?" 237 ships ready for action. The Council forces are maintaining their distance as usual. Chen allowed herself a bitter smile. The Galactic Council had spent 3 years trying to convince humanity to negotiate with the Devourers. They had sent diplomats, filed formal protests about excessive use of force, and held countless meetings about proper military conduct. Meanwhile, human fleets had done the actual work of protecting civilized space. The irony wasn't lost on her. Other species had begun quietly requesting human protection. The proud Kepri Hive Queens, ancient rulers of the Spiral Arm, had formally requested tactical consultation when Devourer scouts probed their borders. The Silicon Concordat traded their most advanced sensor technology for human combat data. Even the mysterious Veil Dancers had emerged from their pocket dimension to observe human war techniques. But it wasn't just military support they wanted. Over the past 3 years, humanity's reputation had transformed completely. Where once they had been seen as a young, aggressive species barely worthy of council membership, now they were viewed as the galaxy's unofficial guardians. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication station, "we're receiving a message from the Altrurian Council fleet. Admiral Zenthari wants to discuss terms before we enter the nebula." Chen sighed. "Put him through." The blue, graceful face of Admiral Zenthari appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Chen could see the pristine bridge of his flagship, unmarked by the scars of real combat. "Admiral Chen," Zenthari began in his melodious voice, "surely we can find a diplomatic solution. The remaining Devourers have made no aggressive moves toward inhabited systems for over 6 months. Because we've been hunting them relentlessly for 3 years, Chen replied. "They're not peaceful, Admiral. They're cornered. Nevertheless, the Council believes that some form of accommodation might be possible, perhaps a designated uninhabited system, where they could rebuild without threatening other species." Chen felt the familiar anger building in her chest. Even after everything they had seen, after all the consumed colonies and absorbed civilizations, some species still couldn't understand the true nature of the threat. "Admiral Zenthari," she said carefully, "I'm going to explain this one more time. These creatures don't want territory. They don't want resources. They want to consume every living thing in the galaxy and use our remains to build more of themselves. There is no negotiation possible with the force of nature." But surely Chen cut him off. "Let me ask you something. Do you negotiate with cancer? Do you find diplomatic solutions with plague? The Devourers are a disease that threatens all organic life. Sometimes the only cure is complete elimination." She could see Zenthari's discomfort with her words. To species that had evolved in peaceful environments, the concept of an enemy that could not be reasoned with was alien and terrifying. "The Council cannot support a policy of total extermination," Zenthari said stiffly. "Then the Council can stay out of our way," Chen replied and cut the connection. She turned to her crew. These were people who had fought beside her for 3 years, who had seen friends die in the war against humanity's worst nightmare. They understood what was at stake. "All ships prepare for final approach. The Maelstrom Nebula is going to interfere with our sensors and communications, so we'll be fighting partially blind, but we've done that before." Over the next 6 hours, the human fleet penetrated deep into the swirling chaos of the Maelstrom Nebula. The ionized gases played havoc with their instruments, turning long-range sensors into useless static. Navigation became a matter of instinct and experience rather than precise calculation. They found the Devourer nest in the nebula's heart, and it was worse than their worst fears. The queen form was the size of a small planet, a writhing mass of absorbed civilizations twisted into something that hurt to look at directly. Chen could see the remains of ships from dozens of species built into its structure, along with organic matter that had once been living beings from across the galaxy. "My God," whispered Captain Kim. "How many worlds did it take to build that thing?" Chen studied the massive creature through the view screen. This was what the Devourers had been building toward all along. Not just consumption for its own sake, but the creation of something that could consume entire star systems at once. "Ma'am," reported the tactical officer, "I'm detecting smaller creatures moving around the queen form. Thousands of them. They're all connected, all part of the same organism." Chen nodded. This was it, the final battle that would determine whether organic life continued to exist in the galaxy, or whether everything became food for an ever-growing cosmic horror. "All ships, weapons free, target the queen form's core structure. We're going to cut the head off this snake." The battle that followed lasted 17 hours and became legend among every spacefaring species in the galaxy. Human ships fought with a desperation born of absolute necessity, knowing that failure meant the end of everything they had ever loved. Captain Rodriguez's daughter, now commanding her mother's old ship, led a squadron of destroyers in a direct assault on the queen form's defensive grid. Engineer Lou Martinez, promoted to Chief of Fleet Operations, coordinated the deployment of specialized weapons designed specifically to poison devourer biology. Halfway through the battle, as human losses mounted and the queen form seemed to grow stronger with each absorbed ship, the creature did something that shocked everyone listening to the communication channels. It spoke. "We offer terms," the voice said, using the absorbed voices of thousands of consumed beings. "Withdraw your forces. Grant us one uninhabited system to rebuild. We will not expand beyond its borders." The communication reached every ship in the human fleet, and beyond that to the Galactic Council forces waiting at the nebula's edge. Chen could imagine Admiral Zenthari's relief at finally receiving the surrender offer he had been hoping for. But Chen remembered Elena Vasquez's desperate transmission 3 years earlier. She remembered Captain Rodriguez's sacrifice. She remembered every human colony that had been consumed to build this monstrosity. Her response became part of galactic history, repeated in military academies and diplomatic schools across dozens of species. "You consumed our colonies. You absorbed our people. You used our children's voices to mock us. You turned living beings into building material for your empire of hunger. There will be no uninhabited system for you. There will be no rebuilding. There will be no terms. There will be no mercy." The final assault broke the queen form apart from the inside out, its massive structure collapsing as human weapons found and destroyed its core consciousness. As it died, the creature released a psychic scream that was felt by every sentient being within 100 light years. When the battle ended, the Maelstrom Nebula was filled with the debris of the last Devourer nest. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, looking out at the wreckage of humanity's greatest enemy, and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. "Admiral," Captain Kim reported, "we're receiving congratulations from fleets across the galaxy. The Kepri are calling it the Great Cleansing. The Silicon Concordat is requesting permission to study the wreckage for defensive applications." Chen nodded wearily. The war was over, but she knew the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had proven that sometimes the youngest and most aggressive species might possess qualities that ancient civilizations had forgotten. They had shown the galaxy that some threats required total destruction, rather than diplomatic accommodation, and they had earned a reputation that would echo across the stars for generations to come. 5 years had passed since Elena Vasquez's desperate transmission from New Hadley's Hope, and the galaxy was a different place. Admiral Chen Wei, now Marshal of Galactic Defense, stood in her office on Terra Prime, looking out at a sight that would have been impossible a decade earlier. Ships from 43 different species docked at humanity's orbital stations. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. In the months following the destruction of the Devourer queen form, other species had slowly begun to acknowledge what humanity had accomplished. The proud Altrurian collective, who had spent 3 years criticizing human military tactics, quietly began incorporating human combat doctrine into their own forces. The ancient Kepri hive queens, rulers of civilizations that predated human spaceflight by millennia, formally requested that human officers train their military leaders, but the real change went deeper than military cooperation. The galaxy had learned that its youngest member species possessed something that older civilizations had lost: Over eons of careful diplomacy, the willingness to face absolute evil with absolute determination. Marshal, came a voice from her communication console. The memorial service at New Hadley's Hope is ready to begin. Chen nodded and activated the long-range viewer. The rebuilt colony appeared on her screen, but it looked nothing like the mining outpost that had existed before the Devourer attack. Now it was a fortress station, its defensive platforms manned by volunteers from across the galaxy. Surrounding the memorial at the station's heart were ships flying the flags of dozens of species, all come to honor the warning that had saved civilized space. At the center of the memorial stood a simple monument carved with text in 17 languages. Chen had memorized the words years ago. They sent an SOS to the galaxy. We heard it first. We answered it last. Never again. The ceremony was brief and dignified. Elena Vasquez, now Director of Early Warning Systems, spoke about the importance of listening to warnings from the frontier. Representatives from various species laid memorial flowers from their homeworlds. Children from the rebuilt colony sang songs in languages their parents had never heard before the war. But the most important moment came when the memorial's eternal flame was rekindled using energy, donated from power systems across the galaxy. That flame represented something new in galactic civilization. The understanding that some threats required unified response rather than careful debate. Marshal, said Captain Kim, now Chen's chief of staff, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim surveys. The exploration fleets have found something interesting. Chen turned from the ceremony to look at her aide. What kind of interesting? Kim's expression was carefully neutral, but Chen had worked with him long enough to read his moods. They've detected artificial structures in the void between galaxies. Old ones, really old. And they're moving toward our galaxy. Chen felt a familiar chill run down her spine. In the 5 years since the Devourer War, humanity had established early warning networks throughout the galaxy's outer regions. They had learned that threats to civilized space rarely announce themselves politely. How long until they reach inhabited systems? Best estimate is 50 to 100 years. But Marshal, the energy signatures are massive. Whatever built those structures makes the Devourers look like a minor pest problem. Chen nodded slowly. She had always known this day would come. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that civilized species couldn't imagine. The Devourers had been just one threat among many lurking in the dark spaces between stars. Send the data to all member species. Full distribution, no classification restrictions, and prepare a message for broadcast on all channels. What should the message say, Marshal? Chen looked out at the memorial service one more time, watching representatives of dozens of species standing together in unity, born from shared danger. Then she looked at the star charts showing new threats approaching from the cosmic deep. Tell them that humanity's watch continues. Tell them we're listening. Tell them we're ready. Over the next few days, Chen's message spread across the galaxy through official diplomatic channels and unofficial networks alike. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had never cooperated before began sharing intelligence about anomalous readings in their sectors. Ancient civilizations opened their archives to share data about previous encounters with extragalactic threats. The Galactic Council, which had spent decades debating proper procedures for minor trade disputes, suddenly found itself coordinating the largest defensive effort in recorded history. But this time they didn't debate the necessity of action. They had learned from the Devourer War that some threats required immediate, decisive response. At the center of it all, humanity found itself in a role no one could have predicted when they first joined galactic civilization. They were no longer the aggressive newcomers barely worthy of membership. They were the guardians, the species other civilizations turned to when faced with existential threats. Marshal, reported Kim during one of their regular briefings, the Veil Dancers have agreed to share their dimensional manipulation technology. The Silicon Concordat is contributing their quantum processing capabilities. Even the isolationist Christarch Collective is offering to open their archives. Chen smiled grimly. And what do they want in return? They want human officers to lead the Joint Defense Force. They want our tactical doctrine. They want to know that when the new threat arrives, humanity will be there to face it. The irony wasn't lost on Chen. 5 years earlier, the galaxy had viewed humanity as a dangerous aberration that needed to be contained and controlled. Now they were viewed as essential protectors whose presence meant the difference between survival and extinction. What about the early warning networks? she asked. "Installation is ahead of schedule. We'll have sensor stations at every major hyperspace junction within 6 months. If anything enters our galaxy from outside, we'll know about it immediately." Chen nodded. The Elena Vasquez Early Warning Network, named for the communications officer, whose desperate message had started humanity's transformation, would ensure that no inhabited system would ever again face surprise attack from cosmic horrors. But more than technology had changed. The galaxy's entire approach to defense had been revolutionized by human doctrine. Gone were the days of careful, measured responses to threats. The new galactic military philosophy was simple: identify dangers early, respond with overwhelming force, and never negotiate with entities that viewed organic life as raw material. "Marshal," Kim said quietly, "there's something else. Personal communication from Earth." Chen accepted the message cylinder and read its contents. Then she read them again, hardly believing what she was seeing. "The Earth government is offering me the position of Planetary Defense Coordinator, full authority over Sol System defense and colonial protection." Kim looked surprised. That's essentially military leadership of all human space. Will you accept?" Chen looked out at the stars visible through her office window. Somewhere among those distant lights were threats that could end all organic life in the galaxy. Other species were counting on humanity to stand guard against the darkness between stars. "Draft a response," she said finally. "Tell Earth I'm honored by the offer, but my duty is here. The galaxy needs guardians who understand that some fights can't be avoided. Only won or lost." She activated her personal communication system and began recording a message that would be broadcast across human space and beyond. "This is Marshal Chen Wei, speaking from Terra Prime. 5 years ago, Elena Vasquez sent a desperate warning from New Hadley's Hope. Her message reached across the galaxy, but humanity heard it first. We answered it last, but we answered it completely." She paused, thinking about all the battles fought, all the sacrifices made, all the lessons learned in blood and determination. Today, we stand watch over civilized space not because we sought this responsibility, but because we proved capable of bearing it. We learned that the galaxy is full of wonders, but also full of horrors that would consume everything we hold dear. The message would reach every human settlement within days, but it would also be monitored by intelligence services from dozens of other species. Shen wanted them all to hear what came next. New threats approach from the cosmic deep. Ancient powers stir in the void between galaxies. When they arrive, they will find us ready. They will find us united. They will find us human. She ended the recording and sent it for immediate broadcast. Outside her window, the memorial flame at New Hadley's Hope burned steadily, visible even from Terra Prime as a tiny point of light in the darkness. Elena Vasquez's warning had been heard. The galaxy had been saved, and somewhere in the void between stars, older and more terrible things than the Devourers heard humanity's new message and decided to wait a little longer before revealing themselves. But when they did come, they would find a galaxy that had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes the newest, youngest, most aggressive species possesses exactly the qualities needed to protect all life from the darkness that hungers eternally in the spaces between worlds. The watch continued. The guard remained vigilant. And in the end, that made all the difference.